Hello, I'm Barry Silverberg, Director of the Center for Nonprofit Studies at Austin Community College, and this is Civil Society, a periodic podcast to provoke more thinking about issues affecting nonprofit effectiveness and success. My guest today is MariBen Ramsey, one of the most connected people in Austin Philanthropy. She served as Vice President and General Counsel of the Austin Community Foundation for 20 years until opening Ramsey Philanthropy 2 years ago. She's also the principal of MariBen Ramsey Law, PLLC. She focuses on nonprofits, foundations, and philanthropy. From my very first day in Austin, the name MariBen Ramsey has meant knowledge, passion, leadership, and engagement in our nonprofit community. She's been a leader in what appears to be every nonprofit in our community. Actually, she served on more than 25 nonprofit boards. Her knowledge and insights are superior to anyone else I know in Austin. She's part of our center's certificate in effective fundraising as well. I measure my own success by the fact that MariBen and I share 645 connections. So, MariBen, welcome.
Great. Glad to be here, Barry.
Is there anyone in the Austin philanthropic scene that you don't know?
Yes,
Okay.
Of course, that's true. And more coming in every day.
Really, that's true. That's true. So you've been around, and you were born here in Texas, and you've been very active in the community. What was this area like when you were growing up? What was Texas like? How has it changed?
So I was born in Austin. I was born in Austin as a result of a special session in 1959 to adopt the first sales tax. My father was in the legislature, and in those days, entire families moved to Austin during the legislative session. So I got the benefit of being born here and really did stay here all my life. And Austin was, what you've probably heard, a sleepy town. I mean, when I graduated high school, there were about 200,000 people in Austin. I went to Austin High. I still can't call it Stephen F. Austin because it was the original high school and it was named after the city, not after the person. But as we grew, we had to start making all the high schools have similar names, so it became Stephen F. Austin.
Revisionist history.
Absolutely. There was no MOPAC, and it was a small community that didn't have great financial resources because it was a government and university town. While both of those can be very prestigious, they're not usually big financial money makers for the folks who live here.
Yep. So how has it changed?
Oh, in every way possible.
That's right. That's right.
At this point, the legislature being here is almost, almost an asterisk. And certainly we have seen industry grow here that absolutely no one contemplated growing up because the business was the university and the state government. So now we have wonderful companies that have come in and are building and new small startup companies that are here to start and grow, which means a lot for Austin's future. There's more traffic.
Yes. Those days of no MOPAC sound like nirvana.
That's right. And there was a time that not only did you not have to make a reservation at a restaurant, you couldn't make a reservation. They didn't even take them.
Now, is this back in the cuneiform days?
That's it, pretty much.
Okay, I assume so.
But we've gotten so many benefits out of the growth and the people that have moved here, the vibrancy, the young people that are going to keep Austin going. We've seen philanthropy grow tremendously from there being very little need for it to, in the sense of very need, because there weren't a lot of nonprofit organizations.
Right.
I won't say that there wasn't need because there weren't issues that need to be dealt with, but there just wasn't that large of a nonprofit, community.
So what is it that drove you or led you to becoming so involved?
I think part of it really is my family background. My parents were both from a very small town in East Texas. My mother grew up 8 miles outside of a town that was out of a county, in a county that had about probably maybe 1,100 people in the whole county. She couldn't even go to high school in that county because there weren't enough kids to have a high school. She and all of her siblings went to various other towns to live because you couldn't even get to the high school in the town and get back every day.
Yeah.
So they had a very different kind of growing up. The only philanthropy you would have been doing would have been to your church, but the real philanthropy would have been to your neighbors. And my grandmother and my grandfather on my mother's side, they were definitely the kind of people. My grandmother during the Depression always kept a set of wood outside for when someone came by and was hungry, that she had a chore that they could do so that they could be fed, but not in any way feel like they were getting a handout.
Interesting, very interesting. So in all this time, the nature of philanthropy, clearly, the need and nature has changed.
Absolutely.
What do you see if you look back on what's happened? Can you trace that and how it's changed?
Well, it's certainly more systemic than it was. I mean, it is still, we have a lot of folks, we have a history of racism in Austin. We'd like to think we never did, but we do. Mm-hmm. And we have never been able to come to grips with that. I think we're trying to now. I don't know that we'll be successful. I don't know that we won't be successful. I know we're making an effort, but I know the effort in a town this size is going to be harder and harder and harder. But that has played a role in who we are, which is very different than who we act like we are.
Or say we are.
And then what we say we are. And that's exactly right. We say we're a very progressive town, very liberal, but yet we have a history that we need to come to grips with.
Absolutely. So we want to talk about Austin Philanthropy. So do you have to be wealthy to give money?
Never. In fact, philanthropy, and I know you do know, means love of humankind. And you can show that in many ways. Giving money is something we do, and that counts, but giving of your time, giving of your talent, helping anyone in any way is really philanthropy.
I love the story about your grandmother. I mean, that's really philanthropy in terms of setting stuff aside. So what do you think the nonprofit sector or the Austin Philanthropy will look like 10 years from now?
Wow.
Make it 5.
Make it 5, good, because it'll probably happen that fast. Some of the things I think that will happen is we will see services delivered with some form of technology. I know someone who's working on how to work on services for children who have been removed from their homes or in the care of the state, and not talking about like giving them an iPhone, but really so that people can be served and reached in ways that can help them, much as whoever thought you could go take a university class through television.
Yeah.
And so I think we'll see that. I think the nonprofit sector is behind in the use of technology, not in the items such as having computers and things like that, but in how to make technology work for their mission.
So you see the application of technology being one of the major changes?
I think so, and I think it's going to happen fast. When it starts, we have in this country, we have tremendous number of entrepreneurs who are looking at ways to create social innovation, and what they know is generally technology.
Yeah.
And I think they were going to bring that to bear. Sean Parker, who of course has been part of Facebook, wrote an article a couple of years ago called Hacker Philanthropy, and how they will not do philanthropy the way it's been done, that they didn't do anything else the way it's been done, so why would they do this?
That's true.
And so he talked about the idea of they will be moving large sums of money and using technology to try to bring solutions that have, been very evasive and difficult and challenging to address. I hope we can actually make some of that happen and solve some of our problems.
So let's move to a very basic question, which I don't think gets asked is, why should somebody give money? Why should somebody be a philanthropist?
Well, obviously, it's every choice that everyone has to make. I don't think about it as about it's giving money. It's about an opportunity to be connected to a community, to be part of a community, to support that community so that that community can have the opportunity to grow and support each other. Because we're all better off together
Absolutely.
Than apart. And if you are giving, you are going to be connected in some way. And again, whether you give of your money or your time or your talent, that makes you part of a community. And when we're in a community, we are more likely to be civil to each other. We are more likely to want to help each other in some way. And we're all going to, rising tides float all boats. And we're all better off because none of us lives here alone, and we can't isolate ourselves in a way that what's happening in one part of town doesn't affect another part of town. Mm-hmm. If everybody is doing well, then we're going to have one of the best communities around. But you can't live in isolation, and so if you don't help others, the fact that there's need, the fact that there are people who are in conflict, and it's going to show up on your doorstep too.
Yep. Well, I think it's an investment, clearly. So let's talk about specifically financial giving.
Okay.
Because that's something that you have great expertise in. So what are very briefly, because I know this could take a long time, what are the various kinds of ways, if I want to give money away, okay, that I might give it away, i.e., charitable trusts, direct donations, and so forth?
Right. So you can obviously write a check directly to the charity of your choice. If you have stock, it can be a tremendous giving tool. Not only when you give it do you have the opportunity to have a tax deduction, but it's at the value of the stock. So if you bought the stock and it was worth $10, maybe it was Dell in the very early 90s, and when you held it for a while, it had split, and all of a sudden you became a Dellionaire. Yes, multiple times you became a Dellionaire, and when you got it, you paid the equivalent of $1. When you give it away, you get to deduct it at what it's become. So it's a wonderful way to do it, and you also avoid capital gains. You can also give tangible goods. I mean, I know and have been part of an organization that we, were left several people's homes. They didn't have children, they didn't have grandchildren, they wanted to do something good, and that is a huge gift. And in fact, people giving through their wills or some other way out of their estate are generally the largest gifts a person can make. And we often overlook that in Austin. Austin has historically been immature philanthropically.
Sure.
We're growing in it, and the thing is, we're not immature because we're not wanting to be giving. We don't have a long history of having, real resources in this community.
Right.
Other parts of the country have had that. I mean, when you go to the Northeast and the Midwest, we are talking about multiple generations of wealth, so that you're on the fourth and fifth and maybe even sixth generation of children who came from family that had wealth, were used to it, and know exactly that it will be there always and that they can give it away. We're learning here, so we're not immature in the sense of not wanting to be giving.
Right.
It's a matter of time, that you had people who all of a sudden thought they were always going to live on a paycheck, who woke up and wonderful things happened, and they were now multimillionaires. They weren't expecting that, and so it takes time to adjust. We're working on our second generation now. So we're still growing. So I used to say Austin was 13. We're now 16 moving to 20 with regard to it. So whenever you see that Austin isn't as in some magazine as giving as some people think it ought to be, the truth is we're young. not only in age, but we're also young in experience in philanthropy. And I think we have made tremendous steps forward, leaps and bounds forward from where we started. And if we continue at that kind of exponential rate, we'll be doing amazing things, by the time Austin is 25 in philanthropy.
The potential is enormous,
It's enormous.
Is what I'm hearing you say. So along the lines, one of the things that I know we have you speak about in our certificate programs is ethics, okay? So what does and I know this is a big question, but what is it that a donor should expect, and I don't mean a thank you note, when they contribute to an organization?
Well, they should expect that the organization is going to use the money for what they either asked for it to be used for,
right,
or what you said you wanted it to be used for. They also ought to be transparent in the work they're doing, the money they're spending, and give you a report back, not necessarily on your dollars, because dollars are fungible, but to show you that the program, what has happened in the program that you were supporting in the organization as a whole. They ought to be transparent with their financials, because the greatest opportunity for a misstep by a nonprofit is to do anything that breaks the public trust,
right,
because frankly, that is every nonprofit's currency, is the public trust. That's the only thing that keeps people giving. When we break that, if any single nonprofit breaks that public trust, whether they're in Austin or they're in New York, it makes every donor wonder, I wonder if the folks that I'm giving to
right,
have had this problem.
Yeah, that's something I don't think sufficiently is understood by all of our colleagues in that process. So what do you see as the top ethical issue in nonprofits today?
Well, I think there are two, in the sense of
I'll let you go with two.
Paying people appropriately, looking at gender bias, and looking at racial bias.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I think, I don't know that it's, well, I do think it is an ethical issue. It's just not recognized as such, is the fact that boards do not feel comfortable in how to evaluate the executive, because they're in a governance role. That's not something we're taught as we're growing up. I mean, when you're in college, you may be taught management, but no one teaches you governance. And so it's very hard to evaluate the work of someone when you don't oversee them every day.
Right.
It's much easier if you manage them,
right,
and I find that they shy away from it, and I think we have lost good executive directors. I think some executive directors who might need to either have some more training, or maybe it's just not the right fit, who stay in place and programs don't do all they could because we have a board who's uncomfortable in taking care of that issue.
So it's basically an issue of the ethics of the board understanding its need to maintain public trust.
Yes.
And they're not there just for their own purposes, they're there to represent the public.
Right, and I recognize that's a very hard job to come as a
very,
group
very hard.
to try to evaluate a person that you don't work with on a daily basis. But we have to do better in this community.
Particularly a nonprofit executive. I know very few kids who at 6 years old say, I'm going to be a nonprofit executive. And if they do, they usually put them away someplace.
Yeah.
So, kind of bringing this to a close, I mean, you've had a very interesting career as a lawyer, as a philanthropist, and being involved in some major organizations in town. What are the top lessons that you would share, lessons learned, to somebody who was coming into the nonprofit arena who says, whoa, I want to be MariBen Ramsey?
I would say volunteer yourself, because unless you have done that, you can't understand the role of your board members.
Absolutely.
You can't understand the roles that are needed in organizations where people are volunteers and working and how that works. I would be sure that you look and see what's happening in the sector. What's happening, what are philanthropic trends? What are the issues going on in town? You need to know more than your organization, because your organization isn't an island. And you need to know what other people are doing, because there may be interaction. Your clients may be their clients, or maybe their clients could help your clients in a way that you'd never thought of.
So collaboration, knowledge.
And awareness.
Yep. Thank you very much.
Thanks,
It's been a pleasure. Clearly, you're one of the very special people in town. And
So,
it's a pleasure.
well, you're very sweet to say
Pleasure
so.
to know you. Please visit our website, nonprofitaustin.org/civil society, to read more about Austin Philanthropy and share your comments on today's podcast. This is Barry Silverberg with Civil Society, a Center for Nonprofit Studies podcast in collaboration with the great folks at ACC TV. Thank you for joining us today.